Welcome to The Real Debrief, the show where we dive deep into the world of film production, exploring the genres you love, the projects making waves, and the trends shaping the industry. We're here to give you a 360-degree review for entertainment professionals. So grab your popcorn and get ready for some expert insights. And, well, the occasional bed joke from Talen. It's The Real Debrief. Now your hosts, Talen and Lisa.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Real Debrief. I'm your host, Talen, and as always, I'm here with my fantastic co-host, Lisa. How's it going, Lisa?
Hey, Talen. I'm doing great. Excited to dive into today's discussion because we've got a fascinating film to explore. And hello to all of our listeners out there. Thanks for joining us for what I think will be a really thought-provoking conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Today, we're diving into Sing Sing, a new prison film that at first glance seems like your typical redemption arc story, but it is much more layered than that. This film touches on important things of rehabilitation, the power of art, and the blurred lines between fiction and reality. Directed by Greg Quidar, Sing Sing uses the real-life Rehabilitation Through the Arts (R.T.A) program at the Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Osing. Directed by Greg Quidar, Sing Sing uses the real-life Rehabilitation Through the Arts (R.T.A) program at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Osing, New York, as a backdrop for its characters' journeys. Lisa, you've been following this movie closely. What are your initial thoughts?
You're right, Talen. There's a lot going on here. What struck me the most about Sing Sing is that it's based on real events and features men who were once incarcerated at Sing Sing itself. This isn't just a prison film with actors playing inmates. It's a film about real people telling their own stories, which brings an entirely new layer of authenticity to the narrative. The film focuses on a group of men in the R.T.A. program, which uses theater as a form of rehabilitation. Through Shakespeare and original works, these men are able to, for a few hours, transcend the oppressive environment of prison and rediscover themselves. It's such a powerful reminder of how art can serve as a lifeline, even in the darkest circumstances.
Yeah, and that opening scene really sets the tone for this. I mean, the film begins with a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, where the prisoners are performing for a large audience. There's this beautiful moment when Colman Domingo, who plays the character Divine G, delivers the famous lines from Lysander about how quick, bright things come to confusion. It's such a fleeting escape for them. They're wearing glittering costumes, caught up in Shakespeare's magic, and then almost immediately they're thrust back into the harsh reality of prison life. I mean, it's such a stark contrast. What did you think of that opening sequence?
That opening was stunning. The way Quidar sets it up really illustrates the duality of their existence. One moment, these men are on stage speaking Shakespeare's poetry, feeling free in that moment of performance. And the next, they're back in their cells. The transition from the open, expressive space of the stage to the suffocating confines of a prison cell was so jarring, but also necessary to show the limitations of their reality. It's not just the literal bars that hold them, but the mental and emotional constraints they live with daily. And Domingo's performance as Divine G is so powerful. He captures the temporary nature of their freedom so well.
Oh, exactly. Domingo brings such depth to Divine G. He's this man who's been wrongfully convicted of murder and has spent years studying law trying to overturn his conviction, all while pouring his energy into writing novels and plays. He's a literary figure within a prison, and I love how the film didn't shy away from showing his pride in that. His cell is covered in papers, legal documents, photos, sticky notes. It's as if his entire world revolves around his pursuit of truth and justice, both for himself and for the men around him. I mean, there's a quiet but undeniable pride in the fact that he's a mentor and leader within this small community, despite the oppressive environment.
Yes, there's such grace to how Domingo portrays that balance of humility and pride. He's not overly boastful, but you can tell there's a part of him that takes pride in being the prison's resident writer and legal expert. And that's something the movie really does well, showing the humanity of these men, their inner lives, and the complexities of their identities beyond just being incarcerated individuals. Divine G, especially, stands out as someone who's managed to carve out a sense of purpose and dignity within an unjust system. His work with the R.T.A. program gives him and the others a sense of agency, even though their physical freedom is limited.
Oh yeah, that is such an important point. Agency within confinement. And what makes Sing Sing stand out to me is that it doesn't portray these men as passive victims of the system. They're actively creating, performing, and engaging with the world through art. And it isn't just a redemption story where we watch a few characters redeem themselves through good behavior. It's more about the daily choices they make to transform their lives, even in a place as dehumanizing as a prison. Divine G's relationship with the program and his fellow inmates, especially with Divine I, played by Clarence Macklin, becomes a key part of the film's emotional arc.
Absolutely. And Divine I's character adds such a rich layer to the story. He starts out as this very aggressive, almost menacing figure. He's involved in the prison's underground drug trade, and when he first joins the R.T.A. program, no one really knows what to make of him. Even Divine G has his doubts, but he gives him a chance. And over the course of the film, we watch Divine I's transformation, not just as an artist, but as a person. He begins to connect with his creative side, and there's a beautiful irony in the fact that he's cast as Hamlet, the ultimate introspective character.
That casting choice is brilliant. The way Sing Sing plays with the idea of who gets to perform certain roles adds so much depth. On the surface, you wouldn't think Divine I would be suited to Hamlet. He's brash, hot-tempered, and intimidating. But underneath that tough exterior is someone who's deeply thoughtful and reflective. Someone who's struggling with questions of identity and purpose, much like Hamlet himself. And through the R.T.A. program, we see that shift in him as he becomes more comfortable with the role and with himself.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of theater, isn't it? It allows people to explore different sides of themselves, to inhabit characters and emotions they might not normally express. For Divine I, stepping into Hamlet's shoes forces him to confront his own inner turmoil, to reflect on his choices, and to grapple with the idea of what it means to be or not to be. The film does such a great job of showing how these performances are not just about entertainment, they're a form of self-exploration and rehabilitation.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about the Rehabilitation Through the Arts, R.T.A. program itself. Founded in 1996, this program is one of several arts programs that operate within correctional facilities across New York State. Its mission is to use the arts as a means of rehabilitation, helping incarcerated individuals develop life skills, build self-esteem, and express their emotions in a healthy way. It's fascinating to see how programs like this can truly transform lives from the inside out.
It really is, Talen. Programs like R.T.A. show us that rehabilitation is about more than just punishment and confinement. It's about creating opportunities for growth and self-reflection. Even in a setting where those things are often seen as luxuries, the film does an incredible job of showing how theater, in particular, can provide a sense of freedom, even if only for a few hours. The men in the program are able to step outside their roles as prisoners and become something more: actors, creators, artists. And in doing so, they gain a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them.
Yeah, it's also interesting to think about how programs like R.T.A. challenge our assumptions about incarceration. So often the narrative around prisons is one of violence, isolation, and hopelessness. But here we see a different side, one where creativity, collaboration, and personal growth are possible. These men are more than their crimes, more than their sentences. They're human beings with talents, dreams, and emotions, and the arts give them a platform to express that.
Yes, and that's what makes Sing Sing so moving. The film doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of prison life, but it also shows us that there's more to these men than their past mistakes. The fact that the film features real participants from the R.T.A. program, men who have experienced incarceration firsthand, adds an extra layer of authenticity to the story. These aren't just actors playing prisoners. These are men who have lived these experiences and are now sharing them through their performances.
And that brings me to a question I've been thinking about. So, Lisa, what do you think it is about art, specifically theater in this case, that makes it such a powerful tool for personal transformation?
That's a great question, Talen. I think art, and theater in particular, allows people to step outside of themselves and explore different aspects of the human experience. When you perform a role, you're not just reciting lines, you're embodying a character, stepping into their shoes, and experiencing their emotions. For people who are incarcerated, that act of stepping outside themselves and into another person's perspective can be incredibly powerful. It allows them to tap into emotions they might have suppressed or haven't had the opportunity to fully explore. In many ways, it's a process of self-discovery. When these men perform characters like Hamlet, they aren't just acting. They're reflecting on their own lives, their own struggles, and their own identities. Theater provides a safe space for them to express vulnerability, anger, grief, joy, emotions that they may not have the freedom to express in their daily lives behind bars.
Yeah, that is such a good point. There's something therapeutic about being able to express those emotions in a controlled, creative environment. For men like Divine I, who enter the R.T.A. program with a tough, hardened exterior, acting gives them permission to be vulnerable, to show a side of themselves that prison life doesn't typically allow. And I think that's why his transformation is so compelling. We see him go from this aggressive, defensive person to someone who's deeply reflective and even gentle by the end of the film.
Yes, and what's really remarkable is that the transformation isn't forced. It's not a sudden 180-degree change. It's gradual, and it feels earned. Divine I doesn't become a completely different person by the end of the film, but he does become more in touch with himself and more aware of how his actions affect others. His journey mirrors what we often see in real-life rehabilitation through the arts. People who, through creativity, find a sense of purpose and a way to channel their emotions constructively.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes the R.T.A. program so effective, right? It's not just about learning how to act or how to perform on stage. It's about learning life skills that can be applied outside of the theater. Collaboration, communication, empathy. These are all things that theater teaches, and they're essential skills for anyone re-entering society after being incarcerated.
Exactly. The arts can serve as a bridge between the incarcerated world and the outside world. In the film, we see how the camaraderie between the men deepens as they work together on their productions. They have to trust each other, support each other, and rely on each other in ways they might not have been used to in the general prison population. And that sense of community carries over into their personal lives as well, whether they're preparing for a parole hearing or simply supporting one another through difficult moments.
Speaking of community, let's talk about Divine G and Divine I's relationship. Their friendship becomes one of the central emotional arcs of the film. At first there's this tension between them with Divine G, unsure if Divine I is serious about participating in the R.T.A. program. But over time, they form a deep bond, and it's incredibly moving to watch their relationship evolve.
Yes, their relationship is one of the film's emotional anchors. Divine G is initially skeptical of Divine I, especially after witnessing his volatile behavior in the prison yard. But as Divine I becomes more involved in the theater program, Divine G starts to see a different side of him. It's almost as if he recognizes a younger version of himself in Divine I, a man who's struggling to reconcile his anger and frustration with a desire for something more meaningful in his life.
Yeah, that moment when Divine G offers to help Divine I prepare for his parole hearing is so powerful. And it's not just an act of kindness, it's a symbol of their mutual respect and trust. I mean, by that point in the film, their bond has transcended the typical prisoner dynamic. They've become friends, almost like brothers, and it is clear that Divine G genuinely cares about Divine I's future.
Yes, and what's really touching about that scene is that Divine G doesn't expect anything in return. He knows his own bid for clemency is likely going nowhere, but he still wants to use his legal knowledge to help Divine I. There's something incredibly selfless about that, and it shows just how much Divine G has grown as a person during his time in prison. He's not just focused on his own freedom. He's actively working to help others achieve theirs.
All right, I want to talk more about the emotional core of Sing Sing. While it's certainly a story about redemption and rehabilitation, the film also delves into some darker, more complicated themes, like the despair of being stuck in a system that feels inescapable. I mean, for all the hope we see in the R.T.A. program, there's also this underlying sadness, especially when we see Divine G's repeated failures to secure clemency. What do you think about how the film balances those two emotional extremes, like hope and despair?
That balance is key to what makes Sing Sing so impactful. It's not a simple feel-good movie where everything gets neatly resolved in the end. And yes, there are moments of hope, especially in the relationships the men build with one another. But there's also this pervasive sense of hopelessness when it comes to the larger system. Divine G's struggle to gain his freedom is a reminder that no matter how much personal growth or rehabilitation a person undergoes, the prison system is often unforgiving and indifferent to those changes.
That is such an important point. I mean, it's easy to forget amidst the camaraderie and artistic expression we see on the screen that these men are still confined. I mean, they've made these incredible strides in their personal development, but they're still subject to the bureaucracy and coldness of the legal system. Divine G's inability to secure clemency despite everything he's done to prove himself, I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's a stark reminder that the system isn't always built to recognize rehabilitation.
Yes, and that's where the film's realism comes in. It doesn't shy away from the fact that personal transformation doesn't always lead to a happy ending. Divine G may have found purpose and community through the R.T.A. program, but that doesn't guarantee his freedom. And that tension between the personal victories these men achieve and the systemic barriers that remain creates a powerful emotional undercurrent throughout the film.
Yeah, and I think that tension is captured so well in the way the film handles the passage of time. There's this sense of repetition and monotony in the men's daily lives, punctuated by moments of creativity and expression through the theater program. I mean, it's like time moves differently in prison, both incredibly fast and painfully slow at the same time.
Yes, and that's reflected in the film's pacing as well. There are moments where we're caught up in the excitement of the men preparing for their performances, and then we're suddenly brought back to the reality of their incarceration. It's almost disorienting, but in a way that's true to the experience of being in prison. There's this constant push and pull between hope and despair, freedom and confinement.
All right, so let's talk about Brent Buell, the outside director who comes into Sing Sing to help the men with their productions. Played by Paul Raci, who you might remember from Sound of Metal, Brent's character is fascinating because he represents this bridge between the outside world and the prison. I mean, what did you think of his role in the story?
Brent is such an interesting character because, as you said, he's the bridge between these two worlds. He's someone who comes into the prison with a lot of privilege. He's free to leave whenever he wants, but he doesn't carry himself with arrogance or condescension. He genuinely believes in the power of theater to transform lives, and you can see that in the way he interacts with the men. He's tough when he needs to be, but he's also compassionate, and that balance makes him an essential part of the R.T.A. program's success.
Yeah, I think that's key. I mean, he's not there to save anyone or to impose his will on them. He's there to facilitate their growth, to guide them as they explore their own creative potential. And there's this great scene where he has a moment of tough love with Divine I, telling him that if he doesn't commit fully to the program, he's not going to get anything out of it. I mean, it's a pivotal moment for Divine Eye because it forces him to make a choice. Is he going to continue with his old ways, or is he going to invest in something new and potentially life-changing?
That scene is so powerful because it shows how much Brent respects these men as individuals. He's not interested in coddling them. He knows they're capable of more, and he's not afraid to push them to reach their full potential. And in that moment, you can see Divine Eye realizing that Brent isn't just another authority figure trying to control him. He's someone who genuinely believes in his ability to change, and that's what makes Divine Eye start to take the program seriously.
It's interesting to see how Brent's presence shifts the dynamic within the group. He's an outsider, but he quickly becomes part of their community. There's this mutual respect between him and the men, and that's what makes the R.T.A. program work so well. It's not about someone coming in and fixing these men. It's about creating a space where they can grow and express themselves on their own terms. All right, now, I also want to talk about how humor plays a role in Sing Sing. For all the heavy themes and emotional depth, there is a surprising amount of humor in the film, particularly in the scenes where the men are rehearsing their plays, like Breaking the Mummy's Code, which is this wild time-traveling farce that incorporates everything from Egyptian mythology to Robin Hood and even a little bit of Hamlet. So, how do you think the film balances the lighter moments with the heavier, more serious themes?
That's such a great point, Talen. I think the humor is essential to the film's emotional balance. Without those moments of levity, Sing Sing could easily become too heavy or even overwhelming. But by incorporating humor, particularly in the scenes where the men are rehearsing or performing, it allows the audience to breathe a bit. It also shows a more human side to these characters. Yes, they're dealing with incredibly serious issues: incarceration, wrongful convictions, life sentences, but they're also people who can laugh, joke, and find joy in creative expression.
Exactly. And I think the humor helps to humanize the men in a way that's really important. I mean, it's easy for films about incarceration to fall into this trap of portraying inmates as one-dimensional. But Sing Sing does the opposite. We see these men as full, complex individuals who, like everyone else, use humor to cope with difficult situations. I mean, the scene where they're working on Breaking the Mummy's Code are not only funny, but also show the camaraderie that develops between them. They're not just prisoners. I mean, they're a group of guys working on a project together, and they find humor in that.
And that camaraderie is such a big part of the R.T.A. program's success. When you're living in a place as isolating and dehumanizing as prison, those connections become lifelines. The humor in the film isn't just there for comedic relief. It's a way for the men to build bonds, to support each other, and just escape the harsh realities of their environment, if only for a little while. And the play they're working on, Breaking the Mummy's Code, is such a perfect metaphor for that. It's absurd and funny, but it's also a form of escape, a way to travel to different worlds and step outside of their circumstances.
Oh, that is such a good way to put it, Lisa. The play allows them to escape in more ways than one. I mean, it's not just about putting on a performance, it's about the process of creating something together, of building something out of nothing. And you can see how much fun they're having with it, even though they're still living under such difficult conditions. It's a reminder that creativity and joy can exist even in the darkest of places.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most powerful messages of the film, that no matter how confined or restricted someone's life might be, art can offer a form of liberation. The humor in the film is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. These men are finding ways to laugh and create in a system that's designed to strip away their humanity. The fact that they can still find joy even in the midst of all the challenges they face speaks volumes about the power of art and community.
All right, I also want to touch on the casting of the film, because it's something that really sets Sing Sing apart. The ensemble features several real-life participants from the R.T.A. program, including Divine Eye and others who served time at Sing Sing. There's a raw authenticity that comes from having these men play versions of themselves. So, what do you think about that choice?
It was such a brilliant decision. By casting real-life participants from the R.T.A. program, the film gains a level of authenticity that you just can't replicate with professional actors alone. These men have lived these experiences. They know what it feels like to be incarcerated, to participate in theater as a form of rehabilitation, and to navigate the complex emotional landscape of life behind bars. Their performances are so grounded in reality that you can't help but feel like you're watching something real, not just a dramatization.
Right, and that authenticity comes through in every scene. Divine Eye in particular stands out because we're essentially watching him play a version of himself. He's not just acting, he's drawing on his own experiences to inform the character, and that brings such depth to this performance. He's got this tough exterior, but as the film progresses, we see more of his vulnerability, and that's something you can't fake.
Exactly. There's this beautiful duality in Divine Eye's performance. He starts off as this hardened, aggressive character, but as we get to know him, we see that he's so much more than that. His participation in the R.T.A. program allows him to tap into parts of himself that he's kept hidden for years. And I think the fact that he's playing a version of himself makes that transformation even more impactful. It's not just character development, it's personal growth that's rooted in his real-life experiences.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Sing Sing feels so different from other prison films. It's not just about actors portraying inmates, it's about real people sharing their stories. There's an intimacy to the film that comes from that, and it allows the audience to connect with the characters on a much deeper level. We're not just watching a narrative unfold, we're watching people who have lived through these experiences reflect on their own lives.
Yes, and that's what makes Sing Sing so special. It blurs the line between fiction and reality in a way that feels completely organic. The fact that many of the cast members are playing versions of themselves adds a layer of depth and honesty to the film. We're not just watching a redemption story unfold. We're watching real people engage with their past, their present, and their futures in a way that's raw and vulnerable.
All right, before we wrap up, I think it's important to talk about the broader context of the film. So, Sing Sing is part of a larger conversation about the role of arts in prison reform. We've seen other films like Caesar Must Die or 12 Angry Lesbians that explore similar themes, using theater as a means of rehabilitation and personal growth for incarcerated individuals. What do you think Sing Sing contributes to that conversation?
That's such an important question, Talen. I think Sing Sing adds a new dimension to the conversation by focusing not just on the performance itself, but on the process of creation and collaboration that leads up to it. A lot of films about prison arts program emphasize the final product, the big performance where everything comes together. But what Sing Sing does so well is show us the behind-the-scenes work that goes into building those connections and fostering personal growth. It's not just about the play they're putting on, it's about the relationships they build and the ways in which they support each other throughout the process.
Yes, that's a great point. This film spends a lot of time showing us the workshops, the rehearsals, the moments of frustration and doubt, and the small victories along the way. It's in those moments that we see how the arts can really transform lives. It's not about putting on a flawless performance, it's about the journey that gets them there. And that's where real growth happens.
Exactly. And I think Sing Sing also contributes to the conversation by showing us the long-term impact of programs like R.T.A. It's not just about what happens during the men's time in prison. It's about how these experiences shape them once they leave. The fact that so many of the cast members are alumni of the R.T.A. program who have since been released speaks to the lasting impact of the program. It's not just a temporary escape from prison life. It's a tool for building skills, confidence, and a sense of purpose that can carry over into life after incarceration.
And that is such an important takeaway. Programs like R.T.A. aren't just about keeping inmates busy or giving them something to do. They're about preparing them for life outside of prison. And I think Sing Sing does a great job of showing how theater can be a powerful tool for rehabilitation, not just because it allows for creative expression, but because it teaches collaboration, empathy, and self-reflection, skills that are crucial for re-entering society.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important to support programs like R.T.A. and to continue advocating for the arts as a means of rehabilitation in correctional facilities. Sing Sing shows us that there's so much potential for growth and transformation within these programs, and it's a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, creativity and connection can make a world of difference.
All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground today, Lisa. Sing Sing is such a rich and layered film, and it offers so much to think about, from the power of theater to the importance of community and the realities of the prison system. So, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think my biggest takeaway from Sing Sing is the reminder of how transformative art can be, even in the most unlikely places. The film beautifully captures the humanity of these men, showing us that they're more than their pasts or their sentences. They're individuals with stories, talents, and the capacity for growth. The fact that this transformation is achieved through art, specifically theater, is incredibly powerful. It reminds us that creative expression isn't just a privilege, it's a fundamental part of what makes us human. It's something that can bring people together, allow them to process trauma, and find a sense of purpose, even in the harshest conditions.
I couldn't agree more. Sing Sing is a film that pushes us to reconsider our perceptions of incarceration and the people who are caught in the system. I mean, it's easy to see prisoners as defined solely by their crimes, but this film challenges that notion by showing us the complexities of their lives, their potential for change, and the importance of creating spaces where that change can happen. It's not just about survival, it's about thriving, even when the odds are stacked against you.
Exactly. And I think Sing Sing does something very important by not romanticizing the experience of incarceration, nor does it offer an overly simplistic redemption narrative. The film is honest about the struggles these men face, both within the prison system and in their own personal journeys. It's about the small victories as much as it's about the larger transformations. And that's what makes it feel so real and emotionally resonant.
And that's what I loved most about the film, the balance between hope and realism. You get these moments of light and joy, especially through the creative process of putting on a play, but there's always this acknowledgement of the reality they're living in. I mean, the system is flawed, and even with the arts and rehabilitation programs, it's still difficult for these men to gain their freedom or change their circumstances. But, I mean, at the same time, this film shows that change can still happen, even if it's on a personal, internal level.
Absolutely. The film doesn't shy away from the systemic issues, but it also doesn't take away from the real personal transformations that the characters go through. And I think that's where Sing Sing really succeeds. It shows us that rehabilitation isn't a straightforward process. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's deeply personal. For some of these men, the freedom they find in theater is the most significant freedom they'll ever experience, even if they never get out of prison. That's a hard truth, but it's also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
Yeah, well said, Lisa. I mean, Sing Sing is definitely one of those films that sticks with you long after the credits roll. It's a reminder of the power of art, the importance of community, and the need for more humane approaches to incarceration. I mean, for our listeners, if you haven't seen Sing Sing yet, we highly recommend checking it out. It is a film that will challenge you, move you, and leave you thinking about the role of art and rehabilitation in ways you might not have considered before.
Yes, definitely check it out if you get the chance. It's a film that offers both emotional depth and important social commentary. and I think it's a great conversation starter for anyone interested in prison reform, the arts, or the power of personal transformation.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us for this in-depth discussion of Sing Sing. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to reach out to us on social media or leave a comment letting us know what you thought of the film. And, of course, if there are any other films or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, let us know.
Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. It's always a pleasure to dive into these important conversations with all of you. And remember, whether it's through film, theater, or any other form of creative expression, art has the power to change lives.
Absolutely. We'll catch you next time on The Real Debrief. Until then, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep looking for the stories that talent are.
This has been The Real Debrief. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, like, rate, and review. We'll see you soon on The Real Debrief.